This is an especially special interview for me because, I mean, you were the woman. Everyone has that person that they obviously knew about. I knew about Joan Wolfe, but in my backyard, I knew about you. I learned about you before Denise Maxwell. I learned about you before, I think you're probably the second female angler I ever heard of. It was Joan and you. Yeah, like it's a big deal to me to have you sitting here because you've been around for ages. And I want to know how you got there and where you've been and where you're going. So we'll start at the beginning if that's okay.
No problem.
Cool.
Well, Joan Wolfe was my hero. Like I would watch Joan Wolfe and say, wow, she's very accomplished and can really carry her weight, so to speak. And she was a great angler, and I really admired her in basically a male dominated sport. And so I was always like, wow, she's pretty cool. She's pretty cool. I met her a few times, talked to her a few times, and I was in awe of her because she did so well. It wasn't the fact that she was a woman. Well, it was a fact, but the fact that she was so well respected and was a really good angler as well. So it was she was my kind of like my little hero too, even though she was in the U.S. So, but there
This
had
is, it's so long ago, Kathy. It's way before the internet. How had you heard about Joan?
well, it would be, believe it or not, books. Like
What are
there would
that?
be
No,
books,
just kidding.
and there'd be magazines. I used to own a fly shop with my husband, and people would swarm in to get the latest, fly fisherman magazines, fly tire magazines, everything, and that was like the current way to get updated with people, places, and things, fly tying, fly fishing, where to go, what to do, what are the new rods, and books. They were very well respected as well in their books. And it's funny you should mention, how did you learn this? I was just going through my fishing books downstairs, which I must have 1,000 of them. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how do people learn now? And it's all the internet. It's all YouTube. You can Google anything and find it. I remember when we got, oh God, this is dating myself, like VHS tapes in our store. And we had our cassette player and little TV up in the corner. And people could come in and watch shows on the free just in our store. And that was before there was even a lot of fishing shows on TV. Like how did people learn this? And you had to do it. And that's like bypassing the part where I learned to fish when I was 7 and got into the fly fishing more when I was about 12 and tying my own flies and just that wonderful sense of accomplishment. But the education came through actually going and doing fly fishing, not only in British Columbia, but around the world to learn. And it wasn't heard of then. I mean, people were traveling, but to get the information, you had to source out the location you wanted to do. You had to write write letters. You had to communicate that way. I'm making myself sound like I'm like 82 years old, but the world has changed so very, very quickly with the advent of communication with emails and the web, and it's amazing what's out there.
But can I tell you something? And I'm totally going to sound like a complete ass right now. I was expecting you to be 80 years old. Not literally. Not literally, not literally. But I was looking you up before I hopped on because we've never really spoke. I don't think we've actually met.
I don't know if we've met in person. I know we've spoke, and I think we might have bumped into each other at a trade show or something in the past, like maybe that. But we haven't spent a lot of time together.
When I looked you up just to get caught up again, I was like, she's a babe. She's a total babe. To me, because you're in that genre of Joan and Kathy. So you are so much older in my head than you really are in real life. So it's funny that you say you're dating yourself, but yes, you've been around for a really bloody long time. So let's start. I'm not going to ask your age, but I am
No,
going
I'm
to
not going to
ask.
tell you anyway. Yeah.
All that matters is babe. You look like a babe. Let's leave it there.
I
But
still have my own teeth. Okay. Yeah, it's good.
but where were you born and raised? I want to know from the very beginning when it all
uh,
started.
I was born in Vancouver, and I ended up like growing up in Maple Ridge from the age of 2. and my family moved out there for employment, and we stayed there. And in Maple Ridge at that time, there was lots of fishing around. There was the Alouette River, where I caught my first fish, and it was on a little spinner. I was 7 years old, and it's like recorded in my mind. I have a terrible memory, but that is imprinted. And there was an old part of a bridge that was left, and I remember looking down and seeing these fish by the pilings, and we put down this little, it was called a Dick Knight, I think. It was a tiny little spoon, and this fish ate it, and we lifted it up, and I was just in awe. I was like, holy smokes, this is very cool. And that was a tipping point for me. And of course, then the fly fishing part didn't come till later, but just the fishing part, it just resonated with me, and I've never really lost it. And then I just did more and more and more of it. Like my mom and I used to go down to the Alouette River to steelhead fish. That's when the steelhead were still there. And we would catch and release them. And sometimes we'd use a lure because I was only 10. But I still remember walking down there and going to the rivers and fishing, and the little lakes. There was Mike Lake that I was particularly fond of, and Raleigh Lake, the little pothole lakes in that region. And I continued to do that. And of course, the Stave, all those areas I'd go and putter around with. And then we joined a fly fishing club when I was about 12. And it was the Dogwood Fly Fishing Club, which is still in existence. And my then father-in-law, Ken Ruddick, helped found it, and the family was really involved with it. And we would go on these outings. And I remember going to a lake in the interior. I can't recall what it was, but the boys went fishing and they left me behind. And I remember having this temper tantrum on shore with my mother. And she said, okay, I tell you what, to get your stuff, and you can fish from that stump to that rock in front of the beach. You put on your life jacket and you don't go any further, and I'll sit here on the picnic table and watch you. So I went back and forth, and ended up catching 6 fish, trolling this fly rod, and netting them in a boat that had no anchors or anything. And the boys came back later that day and they said, how did you do? Well, they said, no, there's no fishing around right now. And they said, was she out in the boat today? I said, how many did she get? And they kind of laughed, and I had got 6 fish. And they all kind of looked at each other, and then they wanted to see what fly I was using, because I was tying on the picnic table bench, and it was probably just a woolly bugger, some crude fly. But I remember having this sense of accomplishment. I can do this. I was in the boat by myself and handled it all. Didn't flip the boat, didn't drown, and it made a big difference. It was like, cool, I can do this. I can do this on my own. The boys can go fishing, but I can still do it on my own. So that really set my avenue, I think, for fishing. And I was into sports big time in high school. And then I blew my knees up playing field hockey. So that slowed me back down. And of course, I got back into fishing because I couldn't do the same sports as I used to. So I had to pull back a little bit after a couple knee surgeries, and I started refocusing on the fishing again, only more so in depth and with more capability. Let's put it that way. So I started from a long, long time ago, and then ended up getting married to Malcolm, who's since passed away, and we started the fly shop with my father-in-law in Maple Ridge. And I remember the day we had to put a sign up saying closed, getting married, open Tuesday, which is funny when you think about it now. Right?
So wait. There's so many questions here. So first of all, steelhead fishing with your mom. How cool was that? Did she fish before meeting your stepdad?
Yes. Yeah. She liked to go out and we'd muck around a little bit, and we'd play around a little bit, but her and I would spend that time together as well.
What was steelhead fishing like back then? I mean, the thought of catching a steelhead in the Alouette is just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, it's beyond comprehension, really. I mean, you get a cutthroat in there, you're jumping up and down and posting it on Facebook. There were steelhead in there, and there were salmon. I remember pink salmon. I don't remember catching a lot, but I remember seeing them. I think there were chum in there too, but I remember it as a kid. Like, there were fish there. I remember catching them, letting them go. I remember fishing up around the Skagit for fish as well, but that wasn't steelhead, that was trout. But it was an outing. It was, and I think that's what a lot of people miss when they talk about just going fishing. It was a real bonding time for me and my mom because my mom worked and it would be a Saturday morning and we'd get up and we'd go down for the Saturday morning for fishing and we'd come back by noon and it was just her and I, getting wet, getting dirty, playing around, catching nothing probably and coming back. But I remember that.
How did your mom meet your stepdad?
I have no idea. They're both, I have no idea. I just remember, us being out a lot and maybe through maybe through a club or something. I don't know. Isn't that funny? I never really thought about it. I was young then too, right?
Yeah.
So didn't
But
pay attention. But
all of a sudden you're a family that fishes. So
yeah, yeah. So it was kind of, we just did it because I think that if we lived in Vancouver, we wouldn't have done it. But the fact that we lived in Maple Ridge, and then Maple Ridge was just a little town, and the outdoors was a big deal. There was lots of places to go play and run, and rivers, and the Alouette, North and South Alouette, and the park. Like there was a lot of outdoor activities then.
yeah, I even when I was younger, I remember it being quite natural.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Not like it
very
is
much so.
now. What about high school? What were you like in high school? You mentioned athletic. Well, were you an outdoorsy girl or did you kind of take a break and come back to it?
I was always outdoorsy. Let's put it this way, I wasn't in the top 10 because I was always outdoorsy and a bit of a tomboy. And I played a lot of sports. And like I say, I blew my knee out when I think I was grade 11. And I did a really good job on it in field hockey. So that fixed that. So I was, having surgeries and full leg casts. So it slowed me down for, the rest of my high school years. And so it kind of threw me back to, like doing more and more, fly tying and fly fishing because I wasn't going to blow my knee out in theory doing that unless I fish a river with big boulders. But so it threw me back into that focus a little bit more, I think. And then, going on outings and fishing the Kamloops area a lot more with my parents and doing that.
Was it weird then? Did friends think that it was peculiar or did people think
Totally.
want to go with you? Yeah, okay.
I didn't get a lot of dates. It was like so yeah, no, yeah, yeah. My high school boots were not stylish,
Okay, so what happens after high school? What do you go to school for?
Well, after high school, I went to university. I went to UBC for a year and took sciences with the desire to get into biologies or fisheries or geography, something like that. But I didn't come from a high income family, so I made it a year and came home, and then I had to work. So I went to work, and I had met Malcolm by then, and one thing led to another, and I didn't get back to university because I didn't have the money, and we ended up getting married, and the fly shop had just started then. We had just kind of, it was in its infancy. So I ended up working in other jobs to support us because the store couldn't support us. We didn't make any money at all. Like it was in its nuances. So I would work for real money and Malcolm would run the store. And then it grew to a point, a couple of years where that balance changed a bit. So I could work part-time and then working in the store. So, at the age of 22, I was co-managing a store
It was
and
that
learning
early? You guys had the store that early? How did you meet Malcolm?
fishing. It was
Uh,
at the Dogwood Fly Fishing Club outing, and we went to Loon Lake. I've never been back there since. We went there and we were fishing, and I was, yeah, very happy to be in a boat by myself. And I don't really remember how this happened, but I ended up in a boat with Malcolm. Wasn't going to talk to this guy. He didn't know nothing. He didn't know nothing. So anyway, I was more afraid about what was going to happen if I had to use the bathroom. Like how do I ask him to go to shore? What was going to happen? So anyway, we ended up being very chatty and talking about fishing and where he'd been around the world and what I was doing, and that was it. And he'd never seen a girl clean a fish before, so it was love at first sight when I had fish guts on my hands.
Was he a lot older than you?
No, 3 years older than me.
Okay, all right.
But he had a
So
big beard, big white beard when he got older. So I thought he was my uncle. It didn't go well.
So then whose idea was it to start the shop? How, I mean, I know you mentioned your stepdad was involved somewhere. What's the story
My
behind the shop?
father-in-law, Ken Ruddick, and Malcolm at the time.
Oh, your father-in-law, Ruddick.
It's my
I got it. That's,
father-in-law, yeah.
yep, yep, yep.
My father-in-law, Ken Ruddick, and Malcolm started the shop in a barn, cleaned out a stall in a barn and started importing things because we couldn't find anything anywhere. And we had people coming from all over the place. And this was located in State Falls, which is a little hamlet region up between Maple Ridge and Mission. And at that point, we said, well, what would happen if we made it an official retail store in Maple Ridge? And that's what we did. And they moved it down there, and we ran it there for 3 years. And it was so popular, we decided to move it to Vancouver and Burnaby. And that's when we moved it into Burnaby, and it became a real going concern.
Who else was operating at that point? Was Michael and Young around
Nope.
then?
Nope, we were the only fly shop west of Toronto.
Wow.
And you couldn't buy material. Everything had to be imported. Everything. All over Europe, England, Southeast Asia, furs, feathers, fly tying materials, tools. And remember, all of this had to be sourced through trade magazines or by mail.
Right, that's
And it's
yeah.
almost inconceivable. Like right now, if you want to find a screwdriver with a purple handle, all you have to do is Google it and you can find it.
Mhm.
But back then, it wasn't that easy. And we would import in bulk. And then we would, like for feathers, we would package it all up ourselves. We had a little gram scale and we package it all up. So divide it all.
Were there a lot of fly fishers back then?
Yes. But there weren't a lot of synthetics. Everything was furs and feathers. Hardy rods were the rod to buy. Hardy reels. That was top of the line.
What
Absolutely.
about neoprene? What was the weight, not waiter, but oh, I guess yeah, the waiters, neoprenes of
Oh,
choice.
God. We used to sell
Bear.
rubber waders.
Rubber waiters, right. Okay.
Pre-neoprene. Like,
No.
oh God, yeah. It sounds like I'm 80, but I remember when neoprene came out and it was like, oh wow, that's gonna keep you warm in the water. You know, it was great. It was latex waders and everything, and then breathables came out. But those cycled through pretty quick. You still see neoprene waders out there, especially for people fishing cold water. But the breathable waders certainly offer a lot more comfort and practicality, you know, for fishing now. But yeah, neoprene waders, and then synthetics, like everything was furs and feathers. Like you see some of the old books, like the English patterns. You see tinsel as a ribbing on flies. There were no beads. There were no foam bodies. There were
Rubber legs.
no rubber legs. I remember when rubber legs came out and the big hoo-ha about, is that a fly or a lure? Because it had rubber legs. And well, I don't even want to go down the road when beads showed up. I mean, that was just like, wow, that's just a lure. You're not fly fishing. You know, their knackers in and out about that. So
What were people fishing for mostly? Trout, salmon, or steelhead on the fly specifically?
oh, steelhead fly fishing was much more limited. Salmon fishing unheard of. So it was mostly trout.
Okay.
And that's influence from Europe. And it's slowly, like I would say, probably in the 80s and the 90s. I mean, you know, barring Joan Wolfe, because there were people that fly fished for tarpon and other species in the 50s. And the thing was that they couldn't create rods that could endure catching 100-pound fish. And there's different types of rods. We have what we commonly use as single-handed fly casting rods, where you cast with one hand and shoot the line and fish. Well, to get any distance on a river, you would have to make them longer. Well, the longer they got, the heavier they got because of the technology, which was basically fiberglass and or cane. And it became very heavy and not practical to do. So people would use a spay rod to try and get some distance and to make it bigger and to make it stronger. And when graphite and fiberglass, thinner fiberglass and graphite came on the market, it permitted a multitude of different lengths and different line weights to be created. So you could make a 9 or an 8 foot number 4, which wouldn't be hard to get in a cane rod before because it's a trout rod, delicate trout rod. But now they were making 10 foot number 8s and 9 foot number 10s and 12s for tarpon and sailfish. And before that, diversity in the manufacture of a rod wasn't there because it would just break or collapse. And then the fly lines have historically gone from braided silk lines to manufactured lines that we see now that are basically a type of PVC or plastic over top of a core and can be made at will, whatever you want. So the technology has opened the diversity of fishing you can do.
Yeah.
So I went down and I was fly fishing for sailfish in Mexico. Somebody was holding, I think it was Jimmy Nix and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. And it was fly fishing for sailfish, and very few people had done that. So I went down to Mexico to attend this course, and I was using a 9 foot number 12 rod and casting flies that were the size of a chicken, at sailfish and hooking them and landing without breaking rods. And that was the tipping point for everything. So traditionally, I would say it would be trout and salmon, especially in Europe, where they would use the spey rods, the double-handed rods, so they could get stronger rods that were longer, up to 14 and 16 feet, to get distance and power. And then the steelhead and Atlantic salmon fishery followed in North America, I would say, or worldwide more for fly fishing. But I wouldn't say there were many people fly fishing for salmon back then, or steelhead. Like not many at all. You couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's fair. I knew for sure not salmon, but I thought maybe it was steelhead that in the 80s there may have been a big boom.
Yes, but not much. Like people from Europe would come over because they would be used to fishing for Atlantic salmon, which is the Atlantic version of our steelhead. Where they come and they return back to the ocean, and they come back and return to the ocean, providing they don't get killed. But yes, there was, and swinging flies. And whereas our Pacific salmon the species comes and dies, so they tend to be eating egg-type patterns and bright things, and it's similar but different than steelhead fishing.
Yeah,
like steelhead come up and take dry flies off the surface, which is spectacular.
Yeah, I wouldn't call Pacific salmon the most romantic of fish.
No, I do like the coho though.
They
Coho are outstanding. Yeah,
a fresh coho will do it, but they're hard on the fly. I always had a hard time Well, that's loaded. That's loaded. It depends on where, I suppose, and how far from the ocean they are at that point.
Well, that's it. Are they into the river by a mile or 5 miles? And have they been beat up? Have they gone through a net? How tired are they? How colored are they? If they're within a few miles of the estuary, they're hot fish. They're still really good fish, and they're making their way up. But once you get up to, they're closer to their spawning grounds. They're tired and starting to color up, and they're not eating anymore. They're interested in spawning, so they're not nearly as easy to catch. And then comes the ethical question. They're near the spawning grounds. Leave them alone.
Yeah, exactly. So the shop then, what did you say your other job was while Malcolm was in the shop?
I didn't.
Oh.
I used to wrap meat in super value at a store. I used to work in a deli, and I used to wrap meat for the butchers and stuff. So yeah, that was an interesting job to this day. Yeah, and it was hard work, but it was a real job with benefits and everything. So I worked there for a long time.
Yeah.
Good 5 years supporting the household on real money, and then it wasn't for a while there before we could take a wage out of the store.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Geez, talk
No,
about a good wife.
no.
That's the ultimate support.
Well, we wanted it to succeed, and it was succeeding, but it took a while to develop it. And remember, your advertising was paper and word of mouth and phone calls and mail.
Right. How long did the shop stay around for? If I recall, it was a long time.
That store was 30 years old. Yeah, we were there for 30 years, well
So
over 30. Two
what?
stores at one point, and yeah,
Oh, yeah, you did have a second location, right? Where
we
was the
did.
second
We had
location?
our store in Burnaby, and then we had a satellite store in Granville Island. It was just a small store.
Okay.
And then through a series of just unfortunate events, we ended up having to close our Burnaby store because the break and enters were terrible there. And we had to shut it down, and
Oh,
we couldn't get insurance because we keep getting hit. So we had no choice but to liquidate, well, move that out, move all the inventory to Granville Island.
yeah, right. Oh, I didn't know that.
It was terrible. Initially, it was great, great place to be, great place to be. And then we started getting B&Es, and it got pretty serious. And then we got the Dear John letter from the insurance company with ridiculous, we couldn't, like a $50,000 deductible if they wanted us to stay. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we
So
had no choice but to move it.
how did that conversation go? Where did you decide to bring your brand? Because at that point, you guys were a brand, right? The
Yeah,
Ruddicks was a
yeah,
proper brand. I still see Ruddicks fly boxes and
yeah.
Ruddick's
And
hats. Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
hat. Yeah, I used to write on all the rods we made. We'd wrap up, we'd get all we'd buy all the blanks and get them all manufactured by a local rod builder guy. I don't know where he is now. And then I would get a calligraphy pen and handwrite on. I
And you
still
don't,
get people. There was a guy from Ontario just a while ago who sought me out through the internet, and he wanted to know what rod this was and what it was good for, and it was a Ruddick's rod.
yeah. And what I love about you guys was it was not just Malcolm and you were Malcolm's wife, because you get a lot of that with couples in fly fishing. Unfortunately, it sucks. But you were and are, and have always been in my mind anyway, a standalone figure. It was never, Malcolm and his wife. It was always Kathy Ruddick. To me, maybe I'm biased, but to me, it was always Kathy Ruddick and Malcolm Ruddick. You stood alone, or am I seeing that through the eyes of a young, influenced girl?
We had two separate roles. We worked in that business together, which was remarkable. That's why we didn't sell guns. We worked together. We commuted together. Um, Malcolm did a lot of the background work. He did a lot of the ordering. We jointly bought stuff, but he would do a lot of that. And conversely, I would be out chatting to people. I wouldn't say I had more social skills, but Malcolm could do it for so long, and he's like, I'm out of here. Like he was a hard worker, but he may not have been the one out doing the chatting as much as me. And then it became a challenge because people would come in the store and walk up to the counter, and I'd be standing there and say, hey, yeah, can I help you? And they'd say, yeah, we want to talk to somebody who knows something. And I'd look at them and I'd say, what do you need to know? And they'd say, well, is there anybody else around here? Not right now. You're going to have to talk to me. What do you need to know? And without a word of a lie, I would have to be politely stand my ground, because if I said, oh, I'll go get somebody for you, let me go get my husband. I mean, it was,
No.
that was right. No, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And when they finally would tell me what they wanted, it was something very mundane and simple, but I would give them 200% and confuse them to death just to prove my point. And they go, okay, we'll take that. So it was very difficult because, nobody wanted to talk to a girl in a fishing store. I mean, and I learned a lot by that. I was angry and I had to stand my ground. I never lost my temper, but if push came to shove, I would stand my ground. Like it was not easy, and I have to sit back and say, okay, if I walked into an automotive store and walked up to the counter and said, hey, and there's girls behind the counter, I would go, do they really know the part I'm looking for? Because I don't. So is that bias there fairly? Maybe I would have thought the same thing. So what's fair is fair. So what you have to do is excel at your knowledge in order to prove half your knowledge. And you
That's
just,
the line. That's the line I've been looking for my entire career. That's the one. That's it. Yes.
You had to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I didn't want credibility for, oh, she's a good woman angler. I was always looking for the credibility where somebody said, she's a good rod. She's a good angler, comma, woman. Because there had to be a certain level of respect earned by people. And it was one thing running the store, but actually getting out there with boots on the ground and being a capable fisherman was the next whole level.
And it worked though. So how did fly fishing and just that British Columbia in general take to you as starting to be seen as the standalone angler, comma, woman?
Comma, woman. Um, I just persevered, and it was my stamina, I think. And I'd hear of something and say, "Oh, that sounds like fun. I think I'll go fish for that. I really want to go fish for that. I want to try fishing for that." I started hosting trips and taking people with me, and they would learn from me. And it started to establish my credibility and the fact that I could actually fish. And then I started going down to the tropics and doing fishing down there, like for bonefish and permit and tarpon and sailfish and you name it. And it just kept building because it's all fishing, it's all fly fishing, but it's a different technique with every species that you go after.
Right. That I didn't realize you were doing all of that back then. Who else was doing it at the time? Were the Becks around? Was Kathy Beck around then?
Yes, Kathy Beck would have been around, but there was many people or anglers in
Yeah.
Canada doing that at all. And again, that was research and going down and doing it. And to find out how to do it or what to do, where to go. I mean, was a challenge. So I started taking groups down. I think in the late '80s was my first hosted trip where I took a group down.
Yeah, that's really early.
That's really early, yeah. And I had started doing those tropical trips and really enjoying it. And I continue to this day. I've caught some significant fish, not just numbers, but bigger fish that you don't just stumble into. You have to be lucky, and you have to put your time in order to get these larger fish in the species. But you also have to think out of the box. So the fly fishing is so multifaceted. And I think that the reason my name may have been out there more is because of all the teaching I did. I
Oh,
taught
right. Yeah.
so many fly fishing schools, destination schools, 1-day schools, casting lessons. I did all of that.
You were pretty
A
heavy with the FFF for a while, right? Or still are,
lot.
maybe?
Yeah, not as much. Not as much. I've since retired, and I'm using my time wisely to fish my brains out. So we cut back a little bit. I'm involved with Freshwater Society of BC, and I'm involved with Fly Fishing Canada on the board of directors, and do that. And I still organize trips and go places
But
and
you did
play.
do the FFF, the stuff with, I remember always seeing you in my head. You were, it was Chan, Ruddick, Rowley. You guys were this kind of this crew.
Yeah, so that FFF is the Fly Fishing Federation.
I guess it's different now. Now it's the International Federation of Fly Fishers, but
Yeah, it's changed its name a little bit. And then, um, like Phil and Brian, and we all started putting on courses in schools, which wasn't done then.
yeah.
And we would advertise it, and we'd get Brian down to do guest speaking. And then I started doing schools with Brian at destinations. We did that for years. I don't have no idea how many years. And then Phil started teaching fly tying at our store, and I get him to help me with my fly fishing schools. And then he has since moved onward and upward with great success, living in Alberta now and doing very, very well for himself. And yeah, you had to do some hardcore homework and really establish yourself. I never wrote a book. I didn't do a video or anything, and maybe I should have, but I always did media in the form of a radio show with Rafe Mayer, where a lot of people ended up hearing my name. And that was on CKNW on Fridays. And it was Rafe. Rafe used to be a customer of ours, came in the store and went, we should do this. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't. Yeah, we should do this. So he convinced me that every Friday during fishing season that I should give an updated fishing report. And I would do that anywhere from from 10 minutes to a half an hour during the season.
Yeah. So
And then
radio and articles too, right? You were writing?
I wrote a bit, yeah, not extensively. I wrote a bit. I did obviously some TV work with several different companies through the years. And that again exposed, there was one show I worked on with Don Wells. It was called Real Adventures. And Don Wells is Marianne off of Gilligan's Island. And there was a local production company that wanted to have Dawn fly fishing around the world and then cooking the catch and then the tourism part of it. So it was a multi-level promotion for any channel that would want it. But she hadn't fly fished in for years and years and years, and they needed a coach or a backup. So they got me involved with it and ended up being a co-host with her for that. And we ended up going to Mexico and Iceland and Scotland and up to Langara, I remember, was one of the first things we did, were fly fishing for sea bass and salmon on the fly. And so that was a real challenge, but very educational again in its own right, especially Iceland.
Yeah, right. Oh my God. I didn't know that you had a whole series like that.
Yeah, there was 1 year of it, and yeah, we did it. I still have some tapes downstairs, but it again, it's really educational because you have to say, okay, what species am I fishing for? What rods, what lines, what flies do I need? What are they eating? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And fishing for Atlantic salmon in Scotland, and then 1 minute you're in your waders and you got to get changed. The next minute you're going down the street doing Scotch tasting in some place, and changing your hats quickly.
Yeah. So why didn't you guide? Was that a thing then? I'm assuming that the guiding industry today is far different than what it was back then.
Absolutely. I taught, I can teach, but to guide in British Columbia, you need a guide's license, or you need to be an assistant guide under somebody's guide license. So, and it's highly regulated and respected. In Alberta, you don't need a guide's license. You can do whatever you like. There's an association, but not legally. So legally, I cannot take somebody out in a boat and guide, but I used to teach a lot. And we would go someplace, and if it was private waters, whatever, I can take people out and show them how to fly fish and do that.
Right. What happened with the shop? Because there's a lot to go through, because you're still at it. Like you said, you're fishing probably harder than ever now, I would imagine, in some ways. So
I'm going out again tomorrow because it's not frozen yet.
What happened with the shop? If we fast forward, and I don't want to skip you or rush you. So in those 30 years of owning the shop, was there anything that I've missed that we need to cover to keep the timeline stitched together?
Well, we opened it in its infancy and built it to a significant store. At one point, we were the Sage rod manufacturer's biggest rod seller in Canada. I mean, we were busy. And of course, it was all at that time where the movie came out with Brad Pitt, The River Runs Through It. And it was like turbocharging the industry. It was insane. And it lifted the whole industry up to a different level, and people became aware of it, and they all wanted to do it. So there was a real push. And then, of course, everybody decided to open fly shops, and the industry started to change in the early 2000s. Well, then the internet was also out there, and now you're not competing with the guy down the street or in the next town. Now you're competing online, and people used to come in, respect your opinion. You'd touch a rod, you'd pick up a rod. It's a brick and mortar place. Somebody's paying rent, insurance, and all their employees, making sure that they are well informed to help their customers. And it's completely reversed now, where people Google it and try to find the best price out there. They're very well educated, and you can have it shipped to your house in 2 days. So the decline of retail, I think, is inevitable with the growth of the internet and the education and being able to purchase online. So people should continue to go into their local fly shop. They should go in there and say, okay, what's your opinion? What do you have? But it's not an easy industry anymore. Any retail. I mean, that's why you're seeing stores, especially specialty stores. You're not making 400% on this stuff. And you need a certain amount of margin to keep that door open.
Yeah. When you guys shut down and I don't want to get too personal, but I am going to ask, when you shut down, was it a moment of strife or was it relief? Where was your headspace at that time?
We lived in Maple Ridge. We were commuting an hour to an hour and a half each way. We couldn't afford to buy a house in town, because the real estate had gone up. We're making fly shop owner business salaries. And it got to be a point where there was a lot of competition. Things weren't like they used to be. It got to be a point of somebody actually was going to buy the store. There were several people, and then they backed out of it. That was what our big plan was. That was our retirement. We would build it up. Somebody would buy Ruddicks and we'd retire and move Kamloops where we can do fishing all the time, or the coast or someplace. And it was just a series of unfortunate events, and it became our hand had to be forced. And we had to liquidate the store, and it absolutely broke my heart. It was my life. It was my life for 30 years. It's what I did. It's what I do. It was synonymous with like breathing to me. It's my hobby. And I can still remember, like cleaning out the store and sitting on the floor at one point in the corner in this half vacant store, and with tears running down my eyes. It broke my heart. It really did. And it took me a while to kind of get up and get going again. And we ended up moving to Kamloops and working for a big box store, which was certainly not the intimate, personal relationships I had with customers before. And I really missed the relationship we had. We had people coming in the door, bringing us wine, giving me hugs, saying, oh, I was going to, you taught my son, you taught me, I was going to get you to start to teach my grandchildren when them got them, again, making me feel like I was 80. But it was really nice that people felt that we gave them not just a product, but some value. And that made me feel good, because we always tried to be very honest. We never BS people. We never, gave anybody bad information, and we always tried to make everything good.
Yeah. And then how long were you at the big box store for?
Less than a year.
Yeah, I don't remember it lasting too long.
That was an education. Yeah, I was just like, oh my God, all of a sudden I was in charge of 30 staff and floor manager and dealing with people that were angry because the buttons came off their sweater, and it was a whole different, I just wasn't used to that. I was used to something that was a little bit more respectful. So it was a whole different ball game. It was almost like the Walmart mentality. I want my money back. I had this mattress 2 years ago and I don't like it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that is fair. I know what we're talking about. And yes, that is accurate. Did Malcolm go with you? What did he end up doing?
Yeah, he was floor manager. Well, they hired us because we had the BC and the fishing knowledge. And we liquidated the store, and we were trying to decide what to do with ourselves. And I was teaching again, like to try and keep our heads above water. And we had the opportunity. They approached us and said, how'd you like to manage it? So we went up there. I remember when somebody said to me, do you own this? And I'm like, there's $5 million in inventory here. No, we don't own it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So,
how did you, what was the decision or how did the decision happen when you both said, we're not doing this anymore. It's time to leave?
Leave where? The store?
Mm-hmm.
Our Ruddick's Fly Shop?
No, the big box.
Wholesale? Oh,
yeah.
Again, I was approached by somebody else, a friend of mine, and said, you need to come work for us. And I went, no, I'm not. And they said, yeah, you are. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, well, think about it. I'll phone you in 6 months. And of course, at the end of 6 months, I was like, holy crap, do I really want to, this isn't really me. And Malcolm stayed there. He was there, and I took the opportunity to go work for a bank, which was probably the furthest thing away that I would have ever done in my life. I would have dug ditches before I went to work for a bank.
Really?
Oh
The
no,
nine to
not
five?
no, not a bank, corporation, credit, debit. Oh no. So I ended up being recruited by the Royal Bank, and they hired me for my management because that's what they're looking for, right?
Yeah, I can see
They said,
that.
well, we can teach you all this stuff. And I said, no, you can't. They said, yeah, we can. I said, no, I don't think you can. So it was a gamble, but I ended up working for the Royal Bank, which was a good move. And I worked for them with HR, people management, risk, credit, bank manager, and did that for a while.
Yeah, I could see
And
you being an excellent manager. I got to be honest. I could see you fitting into that role great. It may not be the best establishment in your mind,
oh,
but as far as a
yeah.
role goes, you would I mean, honestly, Kathy, I think that you'd be amazing in just about any career choice. You're smart, you're quick, all the
Oh, that's
things.
very kind. Thank you. I just at the time I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Just beat my head against the wall. This is not me.
Did you do it
I
for
got
long? I remember you
it.
going to the bank. I always thought you had a background in banking, honestly, or
Hell no.
finance. Yeah,
Hell no.
okay.
No, no. My mom did. Of course,
Okay.
when I was going to do the thing, my mom's like, yay. And I'm like, no. And then, of course, there's benefits. I'm like, maybe I should think about it because we had no pension or anything, right? Working for yourself.
Yeah.
So we went through some hard times, went through some good times. And then, I learned a lot at the bank, but I worked there for about 8 years. And then
Okay. 8 years.
Malcolm was still at Wholesale Sports, and then he got ill and passed away. So yeah, so everything changes. It's one door closes, another one opens.
When did Malcolm pass away? That was in 2007, 18?
20 January 2017. Yeah,
May I ask how he passed?
cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We got cancer. Yeah, I mean, we were just kind of getting back on our feet, and he wasn't feeling well. And when we finally found a doctor, they said, "Yeah, you've got cancer." So he proceeded. They gave him 2 years, and he lasted 7. And he was a stubborn Scot, and he persevered. So it was good in a lot of ways that I'd gone to work for the Royal Bank, because if we had both been working at Wholesale Sports, it would have been a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I can see that. What did
Yep.
you end up doing with your time? I'm assuming when he found out he stopped working at Wholesale Sports or
No,
at
he
the shop?
continued
He
until
did. Okay.
until like his health wouldn't allow him to do that anymore, and I continued to work. We had to, a mortgage to pay,
Yeah. Yeah, I
so I
understand.
continued to work at the bank. And when things got a bit critical, then I took a leave, and he ended up passing within 2 months after that. I was off. So, and then that makes you sit in your tracks and say, okay, now what? But there was no question in my mind that I wouldn't continue doing what I love doing. So I went back to work, and I lasted there about a year. And I thought, life's too short. I want to, there's other lakes I want to fish. There's rivers, there's oceans, and I'm not going to stay here till my teeth are falling out. So I took an early, cautious retirement, and I thought, well, I can always get a job part time doing something, something somewhere doing 20 hours a week if I had to, but I haven't had to. I've been cautious. And the lady that was talking to me financially at the time said, well, what's your lifestyle going to be? Well, I got a truck, and I got a boat, and I got a dog, and way too much fishing gear. So pretty much that. Yeah, pretty much that. So she said, well, I think you'll be fine then. So that's where it kind of ended up. And that's what I try and do as much as I can in many places as I possibly can.
That that now what? That moment of you've lost your husband. And I've got to just knock on wood right now for a number of
Yeah.
reasons, but a surprising amount of women specifically that I've guided over the years have been hit with the now what. And I think there are more of them than we realize. In fact, it's all kind of coming back to me now. A chain. Where did I see that? There was a communication happening. Women can feel very left behind in that moment. They get into a certain age, they feel unseen, their partner is gone. It must be even harder, not harder, but different if you don't have children. And all of
Very
a
much.
sudden, your entire life has done overnight this complete flip or flop. What does the now what look like to have, would you, or I guess if I had to find the words for it, do you have any advice or can you share how you managed it? Because I look at you now, I know it's been a few years, but like I said, and I'm not just saying this, you look spectacular. You've got
Thank
an,
you.
and not just physically, you've got an aura, you're doing it, you're living your best life, you're do you're doing it. What is there anything that these women or other women or myself in the future can look at as far as how to broach or how to approach that now what moment that so many of us face or will face?
Well, I think because I've had other friends where they've lost their husbands, and everybody handles it differently. It was nearer and dearer to my heart because I met Malcolm when I was 16 and he was 19. I didn't have, we had some, cross paths a couple of times there when things weren't getting along, but we all always had this common interest and we always wanted to go fishing and we were in tune with each other, like for all that stuff. Sometimes we need two separate boats. Don't get me wrong. Like, no, I'm not fishing with you today. You go over there. You can't spend that much time with somebody and not want to,
Kill them.
cut accidentally. So but all in all, I mean, I sat back and I'm thinking, okay, it's not like he went fishing and I did a lot of knitting. We had the same, he was my fishing partner, right? There was that commonality. And I was like, okay, now what? And I sat back and I'd see some people lose their husband, like I said, and they'd move on. And it took me a while. But as I said, like I start looking at the amount of tackle and fishing rods. And yeah, I remember when we did those flies and we fished here. And yeah, that's, because it keeps coming up over and over and over because I keep doing this. And Malcolm's there. And oh yeah, I remember Malcolm and I fished that lake and we did this and this and this. It took me a couple of years to kind of digest that. Okay, well, I just do it on my own. And being able to make major decisions and move forward. And not having kids is a big thing. And then my mom passed away 3 years after Malcolm passed away. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting here as an island. It kind of felt, and I took me and the dog go fishing. If there's, you can sit on a stump and mourn, or you can live respecting that time you had with that individual who was the other half of your life and embrace it and respect it, and then move forward, continuing to do what you want to do, regardless if it's, in my case, it was fishing. So I could curl up in the fetal position and do nothing, or I could say, you know what, I'm going to go do this, and this, and this. And it is what it is. If I have a good fishing day, fine, but I've got my boat, and I've got, I say my dogs, and I've got all the gear I really need ever, except when I put it in the prop in the motor. And I see people, meet people, and still teach, and you move forward. You move forward, but it's not easy at first because it's like your whole life you grow up, and it's not supposed to end like that. You're supposed to live to your 90 and then get old and die, and it didn't happen. And I'm like, well, shit. Oops, pardon my language.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, bleep. We were supposed to buy a motorhome and fly fish across Canada and the United States, and the Yukon and Alaska. Plans went sideways, and then after a while, you say, "Well, there's no reason I can't do that."
Yeah. Yeah. Your island analogy is so bang on. Do you feel unseen? And I've got part more to the story, but I'm going to just start there. Do you ever feel unseen?
Yes,
Yeah.
on certain levels, yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm not on social media, because I'm not doing podcasts, because I'm not, on there all the time. I watch it, and I read it, but I don't post often. I'm seen on sport fishing on the fly a lot because I do a lot of shows with those guys. I got into competitive fishing again for a while, so it was, some stuff on the internet about that. But I see people coming up now and they're in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're like, look what I did all this, and I've done this, and I've done this, and I'm sitting back there, and I feel like saying, yeah, I did that 30 years ago. I feel that they haven't paid their dues, and yet they think they're pretty hot stuff. And kudos for them for doing it. But lots of times I feel like, yeah, people don't know the challenges and the accomplishments I think I did in the era, in that time. But I get together with women fishermen now, or to an event, and I look at the capabilities of these women, and it blows my socks off. Absolutely. When I used to teach women's fly fishing courses, they'd be there with their arms crossed, like picking their ear, like, oh, what time is it? Are we still here? Why are they here? Why are they here? Because my husband didn't want to teach me, because I should do it. Well, because the parachute course, skydiving was full, so I think I'll take this one. So they weren't there out of passion.
Yeah.
They were there like, yeah, we should do this. So that I noticed that. And I'd be teaching groups of anywhere from 6 to 10 ladies at a time. So every once in a while you'd see somebody who was like, yeah, this is cool. And my advice to them was be competent and catch fish after. Like, go out there, tie your own nets, fall in the water, learn to wade, row a boat, figure out what flies to use, and the rest will follow. And be yourself. Like, don't be dependent. Like, figure everything out yourself. And the women that I see now are just over the top. It's craziness. I am so proud of them and the passion they have, and getting dirty and cold and going out there. And like, before, like, women didn't even want to touch fish, right? And it's like, whoa, things have changed, and it's awesome. The female engagement in fishing / fly fishing has totally changed, and I think it's wonderful for the industry, and I think it's wonderful for the female audience, because let's face it, somebody like yourself with a little one, you're going to be taking them out fishing, and I think that's great. That's how I started with my mom.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's interesting on that is what I'm seeing, just looking at optics and the world today that has such a short memory. I feel like there's this everyone's looking very closely on the 20, 30, even I'm in my 40s now, even 40-year-olds. But there seems to be this era or this age that gets overlooked. And I mentioned this passionately because I was at Joan Wolf's house recently.
Oh,
And it was really hard to have this conversation. And I'm going to share this conversation because I think it's important. Joan, we talk about Joan. I mean, it just opens talking about Joan. We don't think anything of it. It's Joan, right? I mean, everyone
the
wants to
legend.
know
Yep.
Joan. And Joan told me that she was ready to die because she doesn't contribute anything else to the sport now that she loves so much. And that made me feel like I wanted to throw up. And I
Mm.
realized in that moment, when I was sitting there surrounded by almost a century of history, she has got no idea how loved and respected she is. She really does not in so many ways because nobody reaches out anymore. And a lot of the reason why people don't reach out is they just feel like maybe she's too busy or she's too famous or she's too X, Y, or Z. And this comes at a really vulnerable or at a really sensitive time in my life because Lonnie Waller, who died, he died
Yeah.
thinking everyone had forgotten about him. There's this weird divide right now where it's almost like younger people feel like the legends are too legendary to reach out, but these older people are dying alone and feeling like they've been forgotten. Whereas we're here talking casually on podcasts and social media like they're, this household name. And I don't know. You're obviously not 80,
No,
but you're not 20
no.
and you're so well spoken and you're so honest. What can we do? What do you guys need to do? How do we bridge this gap? Because it's a really ugly gap. I don't like it. It makes me feel icky.
Well, there's a lot of knowledge to be shared. And I think that's a good question. But a lot of the commitment's got to come from my end, where do I want to start teaching courses again and do weekend things? And or do I want my little bit of my own world where I have my quiet time and I go fishing with my dog or my friends or whatever?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how to close that gap because I'm seeing it like you remember Ruddick's Fly Shop, you remember me, but that gap is getting wider and wider. And it's a generational gap where these new people now, like they don't know, like it's not crossing over anymore. So how do you get knowledge from, for lack of a better word, senior anglers or knowledgeable anglers to the younger crowd and to try and help them and help support them? And I podcasts, reaching out, helping people. I got involved with the competitive fly fishing again. I did it many years ago, and I kind of got talked into doing it again. So I started doing it again. These new people, they have a lot of knowledge, but I'm seeing some of the gaps, and they just have to, like, you have a lot to give, and I just don't know, because they don't know you the same as maybe the people in the middle would have known you. I'm having trouble explaining it. I guess
No,
it's a
I'm
general
seeing it though.
thing.
Yeah. And it's not just fly fishing, it's everything.
Oh, it's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mentorship is a big one. I think you're right there,
yes,
having a bit of mentorship.
yes.
Because you're right.
Yeah.
When you get to a state, I mean, even myself, you get to a stage where you're like, I don't need to post this. I'm busy fishing. But
Yeah.
like I don't.
Well, I should. Like, I had a really good day the other day. I froze my fingers off. I had a great steelhead trip this year and caught the biggest steelhead I've ever. It was 25 pounds, the biggest
Oh,
steelhead I'm ever going to come. And I should be splattering that all over my Facebook page or my Instagram and stuff. And I find I don't, and I should. So am I my own fault because I'm not tooting my own horn? Because I'm not forefront in the media, because I'm not, because that's what the younger generation communicates through, and we grew up in a time where that wasn't there, so it was always word of mouth or whatever. So there's that gap, and part of me is like, I can't be bothered, I
well,
just want to
it sounds like maturity to me. You know what I mean? Like
go.
it's
So old maturity, yeah, maturity, yeah.
no,
So
but you're right. It's a very, there's lots of layers to it. There's a lot of layers to it. But I just find myself thinking about these things sometimes when it's quiet. Well, I would like to, and I'm going to put this out there. I want to get Joan one of those digital picture frames where
yes,
you can upload videos or
yes,
photos from afar
yeah,
and just
those are
remind
fantastic.
her of all the lives that she's touched. I mean, she sat there and asked us to share stories about our fishing so that she could live vicariously through us. But to hear her say that she didn't want to be here anymore because she can no longer contribute to the sport and the industry that she loves so much,
I
that
get
doesn't sit well with me.
that's a very sad statement to hear, because like she was my mentor, and I was like, oh wow, look at her, look what she's done. And the technology back then was the pits, right?
Yeah.
It's what she's done and what she's accomplished. But I can see where if she has accomplished as much as she can based on her age and her health, based on her accomplishments, and if there's no challenge there anymore and people aren't approaching her and she feels that she can't give, I can almost see where she's frustrated and she's, I got nothing left to give. Nobody needs to hear my story because it's 2, 3, 4 generations back. And yet they do. They need people, the new anglers need to be reminded of what we went through at the time and the challenges. I remember going to Belize one of the very first times. I hosted a group. I had 8 people with me. They all paired off, and I was a sole angler. So I had to fish alone in the boat with the guy. Went down there, said, hi, Pedro, got it in there. And he's standing there. And he looked at me and he goes, where's your husband? And I said, in Canada. And he went white. And he went, so who else is fishing with you today? I said, no one, you're fishing with me. He didn't say a word. He got out of the boat. He walked down the wharf. He went into the office. And he was in there 10 minutes. And he came back and he got in the boat. And he said, okay, we go fishing. He went into the office and said, you want me to fish with a girl all day? What happens if she's got to go to the bathroom? They're like, she's not going to be able to cast. She's not going to be able to do this. Well, after the first day, we were fine. But that wasn't that long ago. That
No.
was in 1989. And he
Right.
was not going to fish with a girl in his boat. No way. No, get out.
Yeah. It's funny,
So,
I don't know if they need to know about it because I don't know if it makes them better anglers. I mean, in some ways,
no,
maybe, but it sure as hell will make them. I know for me, I appreciate and enjoy the fishery much more, or the history much more, or I'm saying fishery because I'm specifically thinking about Roderick Haig Brown. When I fish the island, it's amazing. And if I'd never heard of Haig Brown, I would really appreciate it, knowing that there are some fish here in this particular river. But knowing that he was there and this is the history and this is how he
yeah,
got there and this is how many fish were there and this is how he used what he used to catch the fish, it makes my experience so much more fulfilling.
it does. Many years ago, I taught a school in Campbell River and I stayed at the house.
Yeah, cool.
And I was in their bedroom upstairs, and I can remember sitting in their bedroom. It wasn't his bedroom; it was the daughter's bedroom. But I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." I'm sleeping in Roderick Haig Brown's house,
Yeah.
and I walked down the wedding trail. It's called to the church where the daughter got married, and I was teaching the casting in the field beside the church. That's a while ago, but I still remember it.
But you remember it. And with there being fewer fish, we need something else to cling to, honestly. Even if it's history, for me, if anything to make it more fulfilling right now.
It is history, and it, like you made a really valid comment where you're saying, I don't think it'll make people better anglers, but I think getting this knowledge and understanding how it was built, that women are getting more respect as valid anglers. It's not so much of an anomaly anymore. Like, they're capable, efficient, good anglers, and they're not afraid to get their feet wet. They're not afraid to take on these challenges and do the best they can, because there was a lot of pushback back then. Like, you weren't invited on trips and you couldn't go play. And there's certain places you don't want to go. Like, I don't like fishing rivers by myself. I always like to have a tag team because that's where you can get into trouble. There's lakes all the time. I guess the ocean. I think that's the sharing point. Like, then you talk to your grandmother and they all have stories like, I remember when, like it, and you kind of laugh at it. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. It's that third generation back where they're saying, I remember when we had to do this and we had to do that, and we didn't have a fridge, we had an ice box, and we laugh at it. And yet, is it not the same type of progression we're dealing with?
It's a good point.
The
Yeah.
time is changing. I mean, I remember going down to the United States in '89. I was going down to some suppliers down there, and I kept seeing vehicles driving by with this WWW on the side of the van. And I went, hell's that? It was in its infancy then in the 90s.
Yep. Yep. It's so true.
Things change. Communication changes. The communication is coming so fast, so quick, so accurately. You can't hardly keep up with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's wonderful for knowledge. I think it's wonderful for knowledge. But at some point, people need hands-on.
Yep. I know that for a fact. I mean, as someone who runs an online membership, we can only go so far with online education. At some point,
Yeah,
you have got to physically get into the water and get your hands dirty.
you do. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to have that one-on-one, that piece. You can read all you want about fly casting. You can read all you want about fly tying. You can watch the videos. But there's a certain point where human nature and the human person gets frustrated with a cast or a tweak or tying a fly or not, and you say, just a second, let's try it this way, and all of a sudden we have success. And you can't do that on a video. You can't do that.
No, you can't. And it doesn't matter how good it is or how great the expert is. What about the competitive fly fishing? What's going on with that right now? Because I know that that was mentioned to me quite recently about you as well.
Well, it's been around for quite a while. I do believe it started in, oh gosh, the international part of it, with the organization committee FIPS Mouche, which is based in France for the fly fishing competition. And the rules are based on European rules. And it has grown and grown and grown over the years. And it used to be one team per country. And it started in, gosh almighty, I think it was in the 80s. And it has grown now. And I got picked for the Canadian national team in 1997. And again, it was that, oh God, they put a woman on the team. So I had to go down there, and I just didn't want to finish dead last. I didn't want to finish dead last. And I wasn't. I was middle of the pack, and I was happier than heck with myself. And then I competed in two more. And the one in Australia, I finished 10th out of 110 men. So I was very pleased with myself. There was another one in England, and then I got away from it because of personal circumstances. And then I got back into it a couple of years ago. And now there's so many divisions of it. There's a women's team. There's the national team. There is a youth team, which is really interesting. It's for kids under 18. And it's rules of the Europeans. So you can't anchor a boat. You have to drift in a boat. You can't stand up and fish. You have to remain seated. You can use beads on flies now. You couldn't do that then. You can only cast forward and to your right at a 90-degree angle to 45-degree angle. It's completely different rules, but I think it hones the skills and educates people, and a team gets together and competes. Yeah. So we had the teams here in Kamloops last year, and then it was in Czechoslovakia this year. But unfortunately, we couldn't get the funding or the team together fast enough. And then this coming year in 2025, it's in Idaho. So we've got a team, and we're going down to that.
Right. And then a women's team or a regular team? Why
do
they have to?
It's a women's team. Like, this is the women's team for Canada was formed in 2023.
Wow. Yeah. Why a women's team? Does it make a difference? I'm confused.
I think between us.
Is this on air? Is this on air or off air?
This is on air.
Okay.
I remember there being protests when I competed in Australia. And they said, the Irish were saying, why is there 3 women on this, out of 110 men? Because I won a certain section of the river. And they were complaining because a woman was on the team. And I'm like, why are you upset about it? Like, I didn't quite understand it.
Come on, Pumpkin, you'll be okay.
Gosh. Yeah, you'll be okay, honey. Here, have a little Kleenex.
Oh, the amount of
and I was just like, wow, that's really interesting. Are you so threatened by it? Like, I mean, what? Anyway, slowly but surely, they decided to, because this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. There are so many women into the sport now that we can say that we've now got the countries that want to or have the inventory of female fly fishers capable of competing. There's 12 countries now just with a women's team.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool.
It's extremely cool. Yeah.
Very cool. So that shows you the progression and the dedication of a lot of the female anglers in this sport, fly fishing especially.
Yeah. Cool.
And you meet some great people and you learn a lot. Like, I fished with a New Zealand woman here last year, and there's a certain technique called fishing in a hang when you're retrieving a fly in a boat, especially a sinking line, and you bring it up, and instead of just picking it out of the water, you let it hang there about 3 feet below the surface. And you just wait, you wait and wait. And sometimes fish will be following it that you can't see. And it kills you, man. You just want to cast again. And you're looking at this fly, and it's just sitting there. And a fish will come out of nowhere and take it. And that's a very European way of doing it. It's called fishing the hang. And I watched this woman do it, and it was really quite interesting. It
How
takes
many
commitment.
how
It
many
takes time.
seconds do you hold it for?
Oh, I hold it for 5 seconds. She held it like for 15 seconds, which
Okay.
was forever. And I'm like, oh my God, like, left it there, right already. Like, it killed me just watching it. But did I learn something? Absolutely.
Yeah. Has it made you a better angler competing?
Yeah. Maybe I'm kind of competitive, so it might be a little bit of a detriment, right? Because I'm like, get her done. I want to get out there and catch fish, right? But I
Yeah.
also think out of the box a lot more now.
Right.
You've got your favorite patterns in your fly box, and I've got way too many. And if something isn't working, I sit back and I'm thinking, okay, reset my hard drive here. Just stop. What would you do? Okay. And sometimes you just gotta do something freakishly weird and it'll work.
Like what? What's the most freakishly weird thing you've done in fishing?
Well, here's a really good example. I can't believe I did this. I was in the Canadian Nationals in Rocky Mountain House in September. There's 2 lake venues and 2 river venues. Went to the lake. I thought I got this, right? Get to the lake, nothing's biting. I was there the day before, scouting it all out. Fish moving everywhere, right? Get there, not a fish, not nothing. And the wind's blowing, and you can't anchor. So that means you have to cast as far as you possibly can, strip as fast as you can, because your fly can't go underneath the boat. So you don't have that same control of a slow, fast retrieve. You have to do it appropriately to wind speed and how fast your boat's moving.
Mm-hmm.
And you use this underwater parachute, drag behind the boat, and it's called a drogue. And you make it skinny and you make it big, and that's how you steer the boat. No oars, no nothing. And then you can pick it up and move. So you always want to be moving slowly so you're covering water, because there's humps and bumps on the bottom. You don't know where the fish are. Anyway, I was having not a particularly good day, and nobody was catching fish, and I really wanted to catch fish. So I went back into my pea brain. I looked at my bathymetric map, and I looked over. I thought, we're going over there. It doesn't make any sense, but we're going there because, number one, the wind isn't blowing. Number two, it's a big mud flat. But fishing a chronomid without being anchored is almost impossible. So we're going to drift. And the woman next to me in the boat gets a fish. I missed 2 fish. We go back and nothing. Nobody's getting anything. And then a few people, very deep, were getting a couple of fish. I went through every size, shape, and color. Then I was in charge of moving the boat, and we were on electric motors, but we were sitting up high, and a gust of wind came up, blew my fly line off, and it wrapped around the electric motor. So now I'm really ticked off. I reached over there and I had the motor up, just about fell out of the boat, tried to unravel it. Meantime, my competitor friend in the boat, she's fishing. I thought, screw this, just took my knife. And what I ended up doing is just cutting the line, so, and I'm like, damn it, right? I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? So I thought, I've had it. I've had enough. I have got 20 minutes left before the 3-hour session's up. I'm going to take my floating line. You can't use an indicator. You can't use a little bobber, nothing. But I have a floating line with a fluorescent orange tip. Stretched it out, and I put on this ridiculously big red and black flashy thing you should use for a bass. And I just chucked it out there, and I basically sat in my chair, my finger and arms crossed, and went, screw it. I didn't actually say screw it, but I think you understand it. I'm done. I'm so done. I lost a pair of forceps that my partner, I put the other person on fish. I shouldn't have done that. And I get madder and madder. And I'm sure my little veins in my neck were starting to come out. And I look over at the end of my fly line, and it's moving. And I'm like, no way, right? I'm just about, never mind. Anyway, I tightened the line, and I've got 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left before the whistle blows. And I'm slowly moving it, trying to get the slack out of the line without, moving it too much, because it's flat calm, and then it just wiggles a little bit. And I set the hook like I set the hook on a 25-pound steel. And I nailed the stink out of it. And I caught the fish and I landed it 5 seconds after the whistle blew, which made it count. Normally, would I have done that? Absolutely not. And I was like, whoa, like, where did that even come from? Where did it even come from?
Where did it come from? Did you figure
No,
out
nope,
why?
nope. It was just like, screw it. I'll put something big and stupid out there and maybe they'll take it and I'll leave it still, because everybody else was stripping flies and not many people were getting fish. And I tried it for 2.5 hours. It didn't work. And then I chewed my fly line up in the motor. So I'm thinking, well, heck, let's just do that. And it worked. So then, of course, my mind's, going like a gerbil. And I never did figure out why I did it. I think I was just in a snit. I was madder than a hornet.
Yeah.
And the girl in the boat goes, I don't believe it. I said, neither do I. So we both had a good laugh about that.
So you fished with your competitor in the boat?
Yep.
What if you don't like each other?
It's a long 3 hours.
Okay.
When you fish internationally, like when the women's teams, I try to be, I try to help people, but I can't tell them what I'm using if I get a lot of fish and vice versa.
Yeah.
That if it's an international competition and you get the French and the Italians in the same boat, it's not pretty. Right. It's the worst combination you can get. They really go at it. But remember, these people are on teams that are professionally sponsored, and that's what they do. They have their little vest on with all their embroidery and, who's sponsoring them and,
Really? Oh, I didn't know that it had that element to it.
So if they win and they come through on the top, then they're sponsored for another year.
Right. Oh, interesting. Oh, geez, that's a lot of pressure.
No kidding. So the Canadian women's team ended up winning silver medal the first time we ever got together, which was fantastic.
Fantastic.
And they're tough. I mean, we're talking England, Scotland, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the US, the Netherlands, Canada, Czechs. You can't beat the Czechoslovakians. Can't beat the Czechs. They're tough.
Yeah.
But
that is so cool. So what's next for you then?
Well,
besides fishing tomorrow before it freezes.
I'm going fishing tomorrow because it's actually 10 degrees up here right now, and I don't know why. But this looks like Friday and Saturday she's going to get pretty cold, so the little lakes are going to freeze up quickly. Yeah. So I'm going fishing tomorrow and maybe one more day this week, and then I'll have to put the boat away and start cleaning up fishing gear and tying flies. And I'm hoping to do a tropical trip in April.
Okay.
And then my season starts basically, and I fish locally, take trips, go here, go there. A lot of it's in BC. I often go to the Yukon in the summer.
Yeah.
Go up there to a lodge called Kalani Lodge, and I enjoy that. I always seem to be going somewhere and doing something. And there's so many lakes up here. I haven't been ocean fishing for a while, and I'm really missing that. I used to really enjoy fly fishing for coho.
Yeah.
So I'm into that. I used to really enjoy that.
There's a big demand for that. Do you have a website where people can look at maybe some of your classes? Can we get you a website so that people can book your classes?
I digress. How do you get a hold of yourself? I'm like, I should have a website. I should, do an email. I should have a page. I mean,
the winter is here. I'm just saying.
I know. Okay.
Time.
Okay. I'll keep it in mind. I'm just like, yeah, okay. I know I should.
If there was a KathyRuddick.com, you could put everything on it. I'm doing this right now with my friend Jerry. He's going to sell his books through there and his hosted travel. And he can take he's taking all of his recycled writing and putting it up there on blogs for SEO. But I would love to have a KathyRuddick.com. You've got way too much.
I used to have KathyRuddick.com, and then I just got distracted and went with Dodo Bird. So I think it was a maintenance thing, and I couldn't be bothered. I wanted to be fishing rather than work on website.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So yeah, I know I should, and you're right, but I haven't.
I have half of mine just to link KathyRuddick.com on this website or on this podcast for when it comes up, but I won't do that to you.
I'm going to start getting all this stuff.
Now, if people do want to reach you, Kathy, how can they find you, or do you want them not to? What would you prefer?
Well, people contact me through, Messenger quite often. That's just fine, and I can email them through that. I do not have a website. I'm sorry. I should get KathyRuddick.com up and going again, put an email hairdresser there,
Yeah.
but I haven't. Is that bad? Oh my God. I should have, would have, could have. Yeah. It's not that tough to do, but my
Yeah.
motivation's been low.
Yeah, it's so fair. That's fair. Totally fair. Okay, well, is there anything I've missed that's glaringly obvious that you need or you would like for me to ask or add in here?
No, I think you've recycled my life pretty good there. I just I'm very I'm really pleased with what I see with people, the ladies out there, like getting involved with fly fishing. I'm like, kudos to you guys. You know, like it's just, you're taking it seriously. Like it shocked me when I got back into it.
Yeah,
So
they are.
I think that's absolutely amazing. I think that just continue to learn. I think that fly fishing, especially, puts a whole different twist on how you look at fishing. You're more concerned about bugs and the environment and what's going on around you. Although if the only way you can go fishing is to use a lure, then fine, enjoy yourself and respect the environment and respect other people, and get kids out there playing in the muck and the dirt. Give them a little bug net and put a one of those little key chain floaty things on the end of it and get them collecting bugs for you. Take a kid fishing and just get out there and enjoy it. I mean, even if you go out for the day and you don't catch a fish, you still take something away from it. I don't think I ever go out without seeing something and learning something. Go, huh? I've never seen that before.
Yeah, good point. Amazing. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll wrap it up there. Please don't be a stranger. I'd like for you to feel free to reach out at any time.
Yeah, maybe we could even go fishing at some point, April.
Well, where did you get your big steelhead? I mean, don't you?
Skeena,
Okay, good. That's excellent. So in that region, though, you were up north.
the Skeena,
Like proper?
the Skeena.
Whew,
Proper. It was big.
nice.
I mean, I caught some steelhead that day, but I got this monster. I didn't know what I had. It didn't behave right, and I just about died. I couldn't pick it up. I had to sit in the river and pick it up. I'll send you a picture.
Please do. Were you up there? Can I use that photo for this episode?
Sure.
Were you up there this fall?
August.
Oh my gosh, so it's gonna be a bright steelhead too.
Yes, and I was fishing in shorts.
Okay,
On
gotcha.
every level, it's wrong.
Why were you up? So you went up there to go steelhead fishing in August?
Yeah.
Do you ever go up there in September or later in the
Yes,
fall?
I learned how to do very, very good dry fly steelhead fishing on the Babine River.
Yeah, cool. Because we are up there I'm usually up there in August too. I wasn't there this year, but I'm up there every fall. So and I live on the Bulkley. If you're ever up there, just let me know.
Oh, okay. I need your number. And I
Yeah,
live in Kamloops, so
got my email. Just it's an
perfect.
open invitation. Just come on up anytime.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, I can't tell you enough how thankful I am that you said yes. I've always looked up to you. And even my conversations with Joan, it was like, I'm not letting any of these moments pass me by anymore. I'm going to be very vocal about people and the people I appreciate, especially. So thank you for all that you have done. And
Well, thank you very much for being so kind. That's very, very nice. Thank you, April.
it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you.